A 19-year-old Filipino woman was found dead in the desert alongside her friend a few weeks after marrying an influential Dubai sheikh. Both had been shot in the head. Liana Raymond grew up in the small village of San Miguel on the island of Luzon, in a province where most families live on a few dollars a day. Her father worked in the rice fields. Her mother sold vegetables at the local market. There were 5 children in the family, and Liana was the eldest. Their home was a simple hut with bamboo walls and a palm leaf roof. Electricity was intermittent, and there was no running water. The girl finished local school at the age of 16 and began helping her mother at the market. She earned about $20 a week. This money was barely enough to feed the family. Her younger brothers and sisters could not continue their education due to a lack of funds for school supplies and uniforms. Liana's father suffered from chronic back pain after an injury at work, but the family did not have the money for treatment. There was a small agency in the village that helped local girls find work abroad. Many left for the Persian Gulf countries to work as housekeepers or nannies. The pay there was dozens of times higher than in the Philippines. Families who received remittances from daughters working in Dubai or Abu Dhabi could afford to renovate their homes, buy motorcycles, and pay for their younger children's education. Maria Santos had been Liana's friend since childhood. They grew up on neighboring streets, went to school together, and spent all their free time with each other. Maria's family was even poorer. Her father died of malaria when she was 12, leaving her mother alone with 4 children. Maria was forced to drop out of school at 14 to help her family. She worked as a cleaner in a local hotel, earning about $15 a week. When Maria turned 18, she contacted the same agency and left for Dubai to work as a housekeeper. The contract was for 2 years, with a salary of $400 a month. She sent most of the money to her mother. Maria's employer was a wealthy family from the Jumeirah area. The house had 8 bedrooms, a swimming pool, and a large garden. Maria was responsible for cleaning and working in the kitchen. The working day lasted from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, with virtually no days off. Liana stayed in the Philippines and continued to work at the market. The girls kept in touch via instant messengers. Maria told her about life in Dubai, about the wealth of local families, about how much money was spent on things that would be considered incredible luxuries in the Philippines. She described cars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, jewelry, clothes from world-famous designers, and houses the size of an entire neighborhood in their village. A year after Maria's departure, Liana's family's financial situation deteriorated. Her father completely lost his ability to work due to progressive back problems. The family's income fell to a critical level. Liana's mother began to take small loans from neighbors to buy food. The debts grew. The younger children were starving. Liana understood that the situation required radical measures. She contacted an agency and asked them to find her a job in Dubai. An agency employee, a middle-aged man in a white shirt, sat at an old wooden table and leafed through a folder of documents. He explained that demand for Filipino domestic workers had declined and competition was high. Salaries had fallen to $350 a month. But there were other options, he said. Options that could bring in much more money. The agency sometimes received offers from wealthy Arab men looking for wives from Southeast Asia. Such marriages were legal under Islamic law, which allowed a man to have up to 4 wives at the same time. Filipino women were in demand because of their youth, submissiveness, and willingness to convert to Islam. The brides' families were paid a mahar, a wedding ransom, which could range from $50,000 to $150,000, depending on the girl's age and appearance. An agency employee took a photo out of a folder. The picture showed an elderly man in traditional white clothing and a red and white headscarf. He had a gray beard, dark eyes, and wrinkles on his face. The man was 65 years old. His name was Khalid al-Mansouri. He was a member of an influential family clan that owned several construction companies and large tracts of land in Dubai. His fortune was estimated at tens of millions of dollars. Khalid already had 3 wives. The first was his cousin, and they had been married for over 40 years. He had 5 adult children with her. His second wife had given birth to 3 children. The third, much younger, was from Syria and had joined the family 10 years ago. Khalid had no children with his third wife, and now he was looking for a fourth, his last wife, according to Islamic law. The agency sent Khalid several profiles of young Filipino women who were willing to consider a marriage proposal. Among them was Liana's profile with several photos. In the pictures, the girl looked shy, with long dark hair and large brown eyes. Khalid chose her. He told the agency representative that the girl looked modest and well-mannered, just as the wife of a devout Muslim should be. The agency contacted Liana's family. An employee came to their village and presented the offer to the girl's father. The dowry would be $100,000. Half of the amount would be paid immediately after signing the contract, and the other half would be transferred after the wedding. Liana would have to convert to Islam, learn the basic prayers and rules of conduct for a Muslim wife. The agency would arrange all the necessary documents, visa, and flight. Liana's father was Catholic, like most of the residents of their village. The idea that his daughter would convert to another religion and marry an elderly foreigner with 3 wives seemed alien to him. But he looked at his starving younger children, at his wife who cried at night because of their debts, at his own hands that could no longer work. $50,000 would solve all the family's problems for many years to come. He called Liana and explained the situation to her. The girl listened silently. She understood that she had no real choice. The family was starving. Her younger brothers and sisters went to school without shoes because there was no money for new ones. Her mother had sold all her jewelry. The neighbors refused to give them new loans because the old debts had not been repaid. If Liana refused, the family would be out on the street in a few months. Liana agreed. She told her father that she was ready to do it for them. That same evening, she wrote a long message to Maria. She told her about the proposal, that she had accepted it, and how scary the thought of marrying a strange old man was. Maria replied a few hours later. She wrote that she understood Liana, that she would have been in her shoes if she had received such an offer. Then she added that the employers she worked for were acquainted with the Al-Mansouri family. They were very wealthy and influential people in Dubai. The next 2 weeks were spent preparing. A representative from the agency visited Liana every day. He taught her basic Arabic phrases, explained the rules of behavior in a Muslim family, told her how to dress, how to talk to elders, and how to behave with her husband. Liana had to be submissive, quiet, and obedient. She was not to argue with her husband, raise her voice, or leave the house without permission. Her task was to serve her husband, bear children, and keep the house in order. Liana also had to undergo a formal ceremony to convert to Islam. The agency arranged a meeting with a local imam, a Filipino who had himself converted to Islam 20 years earlier. The imam explained the basics of the faith to the girl and taught her to recite the Shahada, the testimony of faith. Liana repeated the words in Arabic, not fully understanding their meaning. The imam issued her a certificate of conversion to Islam, which was necessary for the marriage to take place. The agency transferred the first half of the mahar to Liana's father's account, $50,000, an amount the family had never seen in their entire lives. Her father paid off all his debts, bought medicine for his back, paid for his younger children's education for a year in advance, and repaired the roof of the house. He deposited the remaining money in a local bank. Liana's mother cried with relief and guilt at the same time. She understood that her daughter was sacrificing herself for the sake of the family. The day before her departure, Liana met with Maria, who had flown to the Philippines especially for a short vacation. They walked around the village and sat on the riverbank where they had spent time as children. Maria held Liana's hand and said that soon they would be together again in Dubai, that it wouldn't be long, that everything would work out for them. Liana asked what exactly would work out. Maria replied that she had a plan. Khalid is very rich. His family owns real estate, accounts, businesses. If Liana became his wife, she would have access to some of these resources. Maria worked in the home of friends of the Al-Mansouri family, so she knew how the lives of wealthy Arabs were arranged. Wives had their own money, their own jewelry, their own accounts. Khalid would give Liana money for expenses. Over time, she will be able to save enough for them both to return to the Philippines and start a new life. A life where they won't have to hide. Liana listened and nodded. She asked how long it would take. Maria said a year, maybe 2. They would have to be careful, not arouse suspicion, and save money discreetly. Khalid must not suspect anything. Liana must be the perfect wife, quiet, submissive, grateful. And then, when they had saved enough, they would disappear. They would fly back to the Philippines, to another province where no one knew them. They would buy a small house and open a shop or a cafe. They would live together, as they had always dreamed. Liana asked if it was dangerous. Maria replied that it was dangerous, but they had no other choice. They couldn't be together in the Philippines. Their families, their village, their church would never accept their relationship. It wasn't possible in Dubai either, but there was money there. Money that would give them freedom. They just had to be patient and careful. On the last night before her departure, Liana hardly slept. She lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. She heard her father snoring in the next room, her younger brothers and sisters tossing and turning. She thought about how she would never see this house, this village, these people again. That tomorrow she would fly to another country, to a stranger who would become her husband. A man 3 times her age. A man who already had 3 wives and 8 children. A man she had only seen in a photograph. In the morning, the whole family took Liana to the airport. Her mother cried incessantly. The younger children clung to their sister's hands. Her father stood aside with a stony face. Liana hugged each of them, saying that everything would be fine, that she would write to them every week, that they would see each other again soon. She didn't believe these words, but she kept repeating them. An agency representative accompanied Liana to Dubai. On the plane, the girl sat by the window and watched the Philippine Islands disappear below her. Rice fields, villages, rivers, everything she knew, everything that was her life. The plane rose above the clouds, and only the sea remained below them. The flight lasted about 8 hours. Liana was too nervous to eat. The agency representative tried to calm her down, saying that the Al-Mansouri family was very respected, that they would treat her well, that she was lucky. Liana nodded silently. When the plane landed in Dubai, it was early morning. Liana was taken through passport control, and her luggage was checked by customs. At the airport exit, they were met by a driver in a black suit. He took Liana's suitcase and led them to the car. It was a large black SUV with tinted windows and leather seats. They drove along a wide highway. Skyscrapers, shopping malls, and hotels flashed by outside the window. Liana had never seen anything like it. The buildings were huge, sparkling, and seemed unreal. The roads were perfectly clean, the cars expensive. Everything looked like the set of a movie about the future. The driver turned off the main road into a residential area. Here there were villas surrounded by high walls, palm trees, manicured lawns, flowering shrubs. The car stopped in front of a massive wrought iron gate. The driver pressed a button, and the gate slowly opened. Behind the gates was a spacious courtyard paved with light-colored stone. In the middle was a fountain, surrounded by palm trees growing in large ceramic pots. The house itself was 2 stories high, light beige in color, with large windows and columns at the entrance. It was a villa that could accommodate 20 houses from the village of Liana. An elderly woman in a black abaya with gold embroidery stood at the entrance. Her face was covered with a niqab. Only her eyes were visible. It was Khalid's first wife. She silently looked Liana up and down, then gestured for her to follow her. Inside the house, it was cool from the air conditioning. The floors were white marble. The walls were decorated with Arabic calligraphy in gold frames, and the furniture was dark wood with carvings. The first wife led Liana through the living room, then up the stairs to the second floor. They walked down a long corridor and stopped at a door at the end. The woman opened the door and showed Liana the room. It was a spacious bedroom with a large bed, a wardrobe, a dressing table, and a separate bathroom. The windows overlooked a courtyard with a garden. The first wife said something in Arabic, but Liana didn't understand a word. The woman repeated it more slowly, but that didn't help. Then she simply pointed to the bed, the wardrobe, and the bathroom, and left, closing the door behind her. Liana was left alone. She sat down on the edge of the bed and looked around. The room was larger than her family's entire house in the Philippines. The bed was soft, the sheets were snow white. The bathroom had a huge bathtub, a marble sink, and a mirror covering the entire wall. There were new towels on the shelves and bottles of perfume and cosmetics on the dressing table. Liana went to the window. Below was a garden with fruit trees, rose bushes, and stone paths. In the corner of the garden, she saw a small building that looked like a guest house. Perhaps the servants lived there. She thought of Maria. The girl worked not far from here. Maybe they would see each other soon. Liana took out her phone and wrote Maria a message. She told her that she had arrived, that she had been brought to the house, and that she was in her room. Maria replied almost immediately. She wrote that she was glad Liana was safe, that she needed to be quiet and obedient, that they would see each other soon. In the evening, a young maid came for Liana. The girl was from Indonesia and spoke broken English. She brought Liana an abaya and a hijab and explained with gestures what she needed to put on. Liana changed. The abaya was made of thin black fabric, and the hijab covered her hair and neck. The maid nodded approvingly and motioned for her to follow her. They went down to the dining room on the first floor. A long table was set with food. There were dishes with rice, meat, vegetables, bread, and fruit. Several people were sitting at the table. The first wife was at the head of the table. Next to her were two men in their 30s, probably Khalid's sons. Further down sat two women in hijabs, one of them holding a child in her arms. Two more children sat on high chairs. Everyone was speaking Arabic. Liana was seated at the end of the table. Everyone fell silent and looked at her. The first wife said something. Everyone nodded and continued eating. Liana picked up a fork, but the maid stopped her and showed her that she had to eat with her hands, like everyone else. Liana tried to repeat the action, but it was uncomfortable and awkward. Khalid was not at the table. Liana wanted to ask about him, but did not know how. After dinner, everyone dispersed. The maid accompanied Liana back to her room. The girl lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. She didn't know what would happen next, when she would see Khalid, when the wedding would take place, what would be expected of her. The next morning, the maid woke Liana up. She brought breakfast on a tray and left it on the table by the window. After breakfast, the first wife arrived with an interpreter, a young man in a white shirt and jeans. He explained that he was Khalid's nephew and would help Liana with translation until she learned Arabic. The first wife said through the interpreter that the wedding would take place in 3 days. Until then, Liana had to stay in her room, study prayers, and prepare. A teacher would come to her and teach her the basics of the Islamic faith and the duties of a wife. After the wedding, she would become a full member of the family and Khalid's fourth wife. The next 3 days were a blur. An elderly imam came to see Liana every day. He spoke English with a strong accent and explained to her the rules of Islamic marriage, the duties of a wife, and the importance of obeying her husband. Liana listened and nodded, although much of what he said frightened her. The imam said that a wife must obey her husband in everything, that a husband has the right to punish his wife if she disobeys, and that a wife's main duty is to bear children and serve her husband. On the evening of the third day, the wedding took place. It was a small ceremony at home, attended only by family members and a few close friends of Khalid. Liana was dressed in a luxurious golden wedding dress embroidered with stones. Her hair was styled, her face was made up. She did not recognize herself in the mirror. The ceremony took place in the large living room. Liana sat on a chair surrounded by women from her family. The imam recited prayers in Arabic. Then Khalid was brought in. He was dressed in snow-white clothes, his beard was neatly trimmed, and he smelled of expensive perfume. He sat down opposite Liana, looked at her appraisingly, and nodded with satisfaction. The imam asked Khalid a question, and he answered in the affirmative. Then the imam addressed Liana through an interpreter. He asked if she agreed to become the wife of Khalid al-Mansuri. Liana looked at all the unfamiliar faces around her, at Khalid with his gray beard and cold eyes, at the luxurious house that was now her cage. She thought of her family in the Philippines, of the $50,000 that had saved them from poverty. She thought about Maria, who was waiting for her, about the plan they had to carry out. She said yes. The imam recited a few more prayers, and the marriage was sealed. The guests congratulated Khalid, and the women hugged Liana. A table was set with food, but Liana hardly ate anything. She felt as if none of this was happening to her, as if she were watching someone else's life from the outside. Late in the evening, when the guests had left, Khalid approached Liana. He took her by the hand, his palm dry and rough. He gestured for her to follow him. He led her up the stairs to the second floor, but not to her room, to his. His bedroom was huge, with a bed larger than Liana's entire room in the Philippines. He closed the door. Khalid spoke in broken English. He said that Liana was now his wife and had to fulfill her duties. Liana stood motionless, not knowing what to do. Khalid came closer and began to remove her jewelry. His movements were slow and methodical. Liana closed her eyes and thought about anything but what was happening. She thought about the sea, about the rice fields at home, about Maria. Liana hardly slept that night. Khalid fell asleep quickly, his breathing heavy and hoarse. Liana lay next to him and stared into the darkness. When dawn broke, she quietly got up and returned to her room. She sat on the bed and sat motionless for a long time, staring at one spot. In the days that followed, a certain routine was established. Liana had to wake up early, perform her morning prayers, and then go down to breakfast with the rest of the family. She sat silently, ate little, and answered questions monosyllabically through the interpreter. The first wife treated her coldly, but without open hostility. The second and third wives paid little attention to her. Khalid's children, grown men and women, looked at her with curiosity or indifference. During the day, Liana spent her time in her room or in the garden. She was not allowed to leave the villa unaccompanied. Khalid gave her a credit card for shopping, but there was nothing to buy, and no one to buy it for. A maid brought her food, did her laundry, and cleaned her room. Liana tried to talk to her, but the girl spoke only Indonesian and a few Arabic phrases. In the evening, Khalid usually summoned Liana to his room. Sometimes he just talked to her through an interpreter, asking how she was feeling, whether she liked life in Dubai, whether she was happy. Liana replied that everything was fine, that she was grateful to him for everything. Khalid seemed satisfied with her answers. He said she was a good girl, obedient and modest. That's exactly what a Muslim wife should be like. A week passed. Liana wrote to her parents that everything was fine, that she was being treated well, that she was happy. It was a lie, but she couldn't write the truth. Her family had received the money, and their lives had changed. She couldn't ruin that. Her mother replied with long messages, telling her how they had renovated the house, bought new furniture, and enrolled the younger children in a good school. Her father had found a job as a security guard at a local store, and his back hurt less after treatment. Liana also wrote to Maria every day, short messages about how her day went, what she ate, what she did. Maria rarely replied, usually late at night when she finished work. She wrote that she was very tired, that her employers were demanding, that she missed Liana. She promised that they would see each other soon. 2 weeks after the wedding, Khalid announced that his first wife's family was hiring new servants. They needed a girl to work in the kitchen and help around the house. His first wife was no longer young, and it was difficult for her to cope with all the chores. Khalid asked Liana through an interpreter if she knew anyone from the Philippines who was looking for work. Liana replied that she had a friend who was currently working for another family, but would like to change jobs. Khalid said he could arrange for the contract to be transferred if the girl was a good worker. Liana assured him that Maria was very hardworking and responsible. Khalid nodded and said he would contact the right people. 3 days later, Maria's contract was transferred to the Al-Mansouri family. Her former employers did not object because Khalid's family was influential, and it would have been unwise to refuse them. Maria arrived at the villa on Saturday morning. Liana watched from her bedroom window as the driver brought her in his car. Maria got out with a suitcase and a bag. She was dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt, her hair tied back in a ponytail. The maid showed her into the house and showed her the servants' quarters in a separate building in the garden. Liana couldn't approach Maria right away. That would have aroused suspicion. She had to act as if they were just acquaintances, not close friends. She waited all day for the moment when she could see Maria. In the evening, when everyone had left after dinner, Liana went out into the garden. She pretended to be taking a walk. She approached the servants' quarters and knocked quietly on the door. Maria opened it. They stood and looked at each other for a few seconds. Then Maria pulled Liana inside and closed the door. She hugged her tightly. Liana felt all the tension of the last few weeks leave her. They sat down on the narrow bed in Maria's small room. The room was simple, only a few square meters. A bed, a wardrobe, a small window. Maria asked how Liana was feeling. Liana said she was fine. Maria looked at her closely and said she knew that wasn't true. Liana began to cry. Everything she had been holding back these weeks came pouring out. She told Maria about the wedding, about Khalid, about how she hated every minute in this house. Maria hugged her and said that it would all be over soon, that they just had to hold on a little longer. They agreed to meet at night when everyone was asleep. Liana would climb out of her bedroom window, which was on the first floor, into the garden. They had to be very careful. No one could find out about their meetings. In the eyes of the family, Liana had to remain an obedient wife, and Maria just a servant. The following weeks passed in this double existence. During the day, Liana played the role of Khalid's wife. She prayed, sat with the family, smiled when necessary. In the evenings, she went to Khalid and let him do what he wanted. She closed her eyes and thought about something else. Khalid either didn't notice her absent gaze or didn't pay attention to it. To him, she was an obedient body, performing a function. At night, after midnight, when the house fell asleep, Liana quietly climbed out of the window. The garden was dark, with only a few lanterns lighting the paths. She quickly made her way to the servants' quarters. Maria was always waiting for her. They spent an hour or two together, whispering, holding hands. Those were the only hours when Liana felt alive. Maria worked in the kitchen from 6 in the morning. She prepared breakfast, helped with lunch and dinner, washed the dishes, and cleaned the dining room. There was a lot of work, and the first wife watched everything closely and strictly. Maria did not complain. She told Liana that the main thing now was that they were together and that nothing else mattered. They began to discuss a plan. Liana had to save money. Khalid gave her a card for shopping, and she could withdraw small amounts of cash so as not to arouse suspicion. $500 once a week. She said she was buying clothes, cosmetics, and gifts for her family in the Philippines. Khalid didn't check. He was so rich that these amounts seemed insignificant to him. In a month, Liana had saved about $3,000. She hid the money in a suitcase with a false bottom, which she made by cutting open the lining. Maria also saved her salary, $400 a month. She sent $200 to her mother and hid the rest. They calculated that in 6 months they could save about $15,000. That would be enough to buy tickets to the Philippines, rent a house in another province, and start a small business. But 6 months is a long time. Too long. Liana felt she couldn't hold out that long. Every evening with Khalid became more and more difficult. She started taking sleeping pills, which she secretly took from his first wife's medicine cabinet. She drank before going to Khalid to feel detached, as if it wasn't happening to her. Maria noticed the changes in Liana. The girl became silent, her gaze dull. She hardly ate and lost weight. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Maria became concerned. One night when Liana came to her, Maria asked her directly how long she could live like this. Liana said she didn't know. Maybe a month, maybe less. Maria made a decision. She said they wouldn't wait 6 months. They would leave earlier. They already had about $4,000, which would be enough for tickets and the first few months. They could leave in a few weeks. Liana asked how exactly. Maria said she had an acquaintance, a driver from Bangladesh who worked for her neighbors. He could take them to the airport early in the morning when everyone was asleep. They would fly to Manila, then travel to another province. No one would find them there. Liana listened and felt hope rising inside her. Real tangible hope that this nightmare would soon be over. She asked when exactly they could leave. Maria said in 2 weeks. They needed to prepare the documents, buy tickets online, and make arrangements with the driver. Liana nodded. 2 weeks, 14 days. She could hold out for another 14 days. Liana counted the hours over the next few days. She behaved as usual so as not to arouse suspicion. She prayed, ate with her family, and talked to Khalid through an interpreter. But inside, all her thoughts were of escape. Maria bought tickets for a flight to Manila, departing on Saturday at 6 in the morning. They made arrangements with the driver, who agreed to take them for $200. Maria said they needed to leave at 4 in the morning to make it to check in on time. There were 5 days left. Liana packed her things into a backpack. A minimum of clothes, documents, money. Maria also packed a bag. They were ready. Each night brought them closer to freedom. But after 3 days, something changed. Khalid began to behave differently. He started watching Liana more closely. He asked strange questions. He asked where she went in the evenings, why she didn't sleep at night. Liana replied that she just walked in the garden because she couldn't sleep. Khalid looked at her for a long time, studying her, then nodded and let her go. Liana became worried. She wrote to Maria that Khalid suspected something. Maria replied that they needed to be even more careful, that there were only 2 days left, that they had to hold out. On Thursday evening, Khaled did not call Liana to his room. This was strange, as he usually called her every evening. Liana stayed in her room and waited, but no one came. She went to bed, but could not sleep. Something was wrong. On Friday morning, Khalid's first wife came for Liana. She had an interpreter with her. The woman said through him that Liana had to go with her to the mall. They needed to buy new clothes and gifts for the family. Liana was surprised. She usually never left the house, but she couldn't refuse. She nodded and went to get dressed. They drove in a car with a driver. The first wife sat silently, looking out the window. Liana tried to talk to her through the interpreter, but the woman answered in monosyllables. They arrived at a large shopping center and spent several hours there. The first wife bought things, showed Liana dresses and jewelry, but didn't buy anything for her. They returned home in the evening. Liana immediately went to her room. She wrote to Maria that they were leaving tomorrow, that she needed to be ready at 4 in the morning. Maria replied an hour later. She wrote that everything was ready, that the driver would be waiting at the gate. Liana didn't eat dinner. She told the maid that she wasn't feeling well, that she had a headache. She lay down on the bed and waited. She listened to the sounds of the house, how everything gradually quieted down, how the lights in the rooms were turned off, how silence fell. At midnight, Liana got up. She put on dark clothes and took her backpack. She went to the window and carefully opened it. She listened. Silence. She climbed over the windowsill and jumped into the garden. The grass was wet from the evening watering. Liana quickly went to the servants' quarters. She knocked quietly. No one answered. She knocked again. Silence. Liana tried to open the door. It was unlocked. She opened it and went inside. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. The wardrobe was open. Maria's things were gone. There was a note on the table. Liana picked it up with trembling hands. The note was in English, and the handwriting was not Maria's. There were only a few words written on it. "Go back to your room. Immediately." Liana stood with the note in her hands. Her heart was beating so hard that she could hear it pounding in her ears. Maria was gone. Her things were gone. Someone wrote this note. Someone knows. She turned and ran out of the room. She ran back to the house. She had to get to her room and pretend nothing had happened. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe she could come up with an excuse. But when she ran up to her window, there was a man standing there. It was Khalid's eldest son, about 35 years old. He was dressed in black, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked at Liana with a cold stare. Another man emerged from the shadows behind him, the villa's security guard, large, silent. Khalid's son said something in Arabic. The guard grabbed Liana by the arm. She tried to break free, to scream, but the guard covered her mouth with his hand. With his other hand, he held her by the shoulder. Liana couldn't move. Khalid's son came closer. He looked at her with contempt. He said something harsh in Arabic. Then he waved his hand at the guard. The guard dragged Liana to a car parked at the side entrance to the garden. It was a black SUV with its headlights off. Liana was pushed into the back seat. Khalid's son sat next to her. The guard got behind the wheel. The car quietly drove out of the courtyard, through the side gate. Liana looked out the window. She saw the villa, the garden, everything that had been her prison for the last few weeks, receding into the distance. The car drove through the empty night streets of Dubai. The skyscrapers glowed with lights. Then the city began to disappear. The road narrowed, and there were fewer houses. They turned onto the highway. Ahead was the desert. Liana realized what was happening. She knew stories about girls who had disappeared in this country, about servants who ran away and were found dead, about wives who disgraced their families and were never seen again. She knew that there were laws in this country, but for families like the Al-Mansouris, the laws didn't always work. Money and influence decided many things. She tried to open the door. It was locked. She tried to hit Khalid's son. He easily caught her arm and twisted it painfully. He said something in Arabic, his voice icy. Liana stopped resisting. She realized it was pointless. They drove for over an hour. The desert around them was black, only the headlights illuminating the road ahead. Then the car turned off the highway onto a dirt road. They drove for another 20 minutes. They stopped in the middle of nowhere. There was only sand around them. The guard got out of the car. He opened the trunk. He took out 2 shovels. Then he opened the back door and pulled Liana out. She fell onto the sand. She tried to stand up, but her legs wouldn't hold her. The guard pulled someone else out of the trunk. Maria. The girl was wearing the same clothes Liana had last seen her in. Her hands were tied behind her back. Her mouth was taped shut. Her eyes were wide with terror. They were placed side by side. Khalid's son got out of the car. He took a gun out of his pocket. It was black and matte. He looked at the girls for a long time. Then he threw shovels at their feet. He said something in Arabic. The guard translated it into English. Dig. Liana looked at the shovels, then at Maria. then at the endless desert around them. They were an hour's drive from the city. There was no help coming. Their phones were in the backpack that the guard had taken. It was pointless to scream. There was no one around. Maria looked at Liana. Her lips were taped shut, but her eyes said it all. "I'm sorry. I love you. Goodbye." Liana picked up a shovel. She stuck it in the sand. She started digging. They dug for about an hour. The sand was dense, the shovels heavy. Maria worked with her hands tied, falling several times. The guard lifted her up and forced her to continue. Khalid's son stood aside and smoked, keeping his eyes on them. When the holes were deep enough, about waist deep each, Khalid's son waved his hand. The guard took the shovels. The girls were placed at the edge of the holes, facing the desert. Liana turned around. She wanted to say something, to ask for mercy, to explain, anything. Khalid's son raised his gun. Liana saw the barrel pointed at her. She closed her eyes. Her last thought was of her mother selling vegetables at the market, her younger brothers and sisters in their new school uniforms. A shot broke the silence of the desert. Liana fell face down into the pit. A second shot rang out a few seconds later. Maria collapsed next to her. The guard checked both of their pulses. He nodded. He took a shovel and began to fill the pits with sand. He worked quickly and methodically. Half an hour later, only 2 small mounds remained. The wind began to smooth them out, even before the men left. The car returned to Dubai at dawn. Khalid's son entered the house through the side entrance. He went up to his father's bedroom. Khalid was sitting on the edge of the bed, reading the Quran. He looked up. His son nodded. Khalid closed the book and continued his prayer. In the morning, the first wife informed the servants that Liana and Maria no longer worked in the house. The girls' belongings were packed into boxes and thrown away. Liana's room was cleaned and locked. A week later, a new maid from Sri Lanka took Maria's room in the servants' quarters. An agency representative called Liana's family in the Philippines. He informed them that their daughter had run away with her lover, disgracing Khalid's family. The marriage was dissolved. According to the contract, in the event of a breach of the terms by the bride, the family was obliged to return the dowry, $100,000. The family did not have that kind of money. The representative said he would give them a month to collect the amount. Otherwise, there would be a court case. Liana's father sold the house. Her mother sold everything they had bought with the dowry money. They took out loans from anyone who agreed to give them money. They collected $60,000. The agency wrote off the rest as a bad debt. The family moved to an even poorer neighborhood. The younger children dropped out of school again. The father returned to work in the fields, even though his back made it almost impossible for him to bend over. Liana's mother tried several times to call her daughter. The number was unavailable. She wrote messages, but no one replied. She reported her daughter missing to the Philippine police. The police contacted the authorities in Dubai. They replied that no report of a missing Philippine citizen had been received, and that, according to immigration records, Liana Raymond had left the country 3 weeks earlier on a flight to Bangkok. Maria's mother received the last money transfer from her daughter at the beginning of the month. Then the transfers stopped. All contact was lost. The woman also contacted the police and received the same response. The two mothers met and compared their stories. They realized that their daughters had disappeared on the same day. They tried to attract the attention of the media and wrote to several newspapers. One small newspaper published a note about the missing girls, but the article was not widely circulated. A lawyer who agreed to help the families free of charge tried to obtain information about the girls' whereabouts through the Philippine embassy in the UAE. The embassy sent a request to the Dubai police. The police replied that both girls had left the country voluntarily and that no crimes had been reported. The case was closed. Khalid al-Mansouri continued to lead a normal life. He visited the mosque 5 times a day. He prayed long and intently. He donated money to charity. He was respected in the business community as an honest and God-fearing man. 6 months later, he took a new fourth wife, this time a 20-year-old girl from Indonesia. Khalid's eldest son was promoted in the family business. He became the director of security for all of the company's facilities. The security guard who was with him that night quit a year later and returned to Pakistan. He bought a small shop there with the money he had saved in Dubai. The bodies of Liana and Maria were never found. The desert holds many secrets, and 2 mounds among the endless sands were no different from thousands of other irregularities in the terrain. Within a few months, the wind had completely leveled them with the ground. Officially, the girls are listed as missing. Their case is in the Manila Police Archives, among thousands of other similar cases of Filipino workers who have disappeared abroad. Every year, dozens of Filipino women do not return home from the Persian Gulf countries. Some do indeed run away and start a new life. Others die from accidents or illness. Others simply disappear, and no one ever finds out what happened to them. The story of Liana Raymond and Maria Santos is yet another line in these statistics. Their families are still waiting. Their mothers sometimes receive messages from scammers who claim to have seen their daughters in Thailand or Malaysia. They ask for money in exchange for information. The families no longer believe them, but they check every time because hope dies last. The only thing left of the girls are a few photos on their relatives' phones and entries in their village's church records. Their names are listed among those who have been baptized. The column for death is left blank. Technically, they are still alive. They just disappeared somewhere between Dubai and Manila, between the hope for a better life and the reality that turned out to be a grave in the sand.